Okay, welcome back. This is lesson 2, starting here in the end of last week of May. We're in summer 2018, lesson 2, and this is about nutrition labeling. So there's 5 different things we'll talk about. The parts of the food label, so every food label has requirements by the FDA that has to be on it. We'll look at how you could choose foods that are nutrient dense. So there's a special rule they use, the 520 rule. It can get complicated, the labels. So we talk about the daily value, the percent of daily value, and that's this 520. We'll show you that on the label. We'll compare the new label requirements. So I think starting actually next week, there's some new label requirements that are going to be on labels, nutrition information labels. Then we'll figure how to calculate the percent of the macronutrients, fat, carbs, and protein. So we can figure out how they get the calorie content. So in other words, it's only these 3 macronutrients that provide calories. And then we'll look at claims. So there's different claims on labels like prevents cancer or lowers your cholesterol level. So we'll look at what's required and allowed on a label. So some companies will have designated employees that just work on labels. Large food companies will hire someone that can just make sure that each label follows the FDA requirements, and also words things that are to their advantage. So just think about if you were working on this label, they have to begin with the name of the item, obviously. They have to have the content, so you can obviously compare if you're doing comparison shopping. You can see like how many ounces this is compared to another item, and then the cost. And then the ingredient list has to be on there. Nutrition information. So the ingredient list is separate from nutrition facts. It's a separate requirement. Often it's listed after nutrition facts, but it doesn't matter where it is. It just has to be on the label. And the manufacturer. So you can always contact, like here it tells which office and which address. You can always contact the manufacturer. So those are the 5 items on every label. And then when you're reading, this is the kind of the 520 rule. So if and you'll see this when you look at labels, there's a daily value, the percent daily value. This is not exactly the same as the RDA. As you remember from last lesson, the RDA changes based on your gender and your age. Like for instance, the RDA for iron is much higher for a female teenager than a male teenager. It's higher for a pregnant woman than it is for an adult male. So they pick one value to be the daily value. So they're just picking one number for everybody. And they then will say, okay, how much iron or how much protein? Here's iron down here, 4%. So how much iron does this item have? Well, it has 4% of the daily value. So if the daily value is 18 or 10, I think it's 10 milligrams, then this has 4% of the daily value. Or you can look at sodium. So this is kind of handy because it shows you the table. How much sodium is considered the daily value? It actually tells you down here in this little table that 2,400 milligrams is considered the daily value. This product has 20% of 2,400 milligrams in it. And they tell you here it's 470. This happens to give you the exact number because it's required that you put sodium on the label because so many people are concerned about sodium levels. Here again, you can say total fat. Okay, total fat is 18% of the daily value, or 12 grams. And the daily value is suggested to be 66 grams a day. And that's based on a 2,000 calorie diet. If you ate a higher calorie diet, then you would expect to have 80 grams a day. So it's a lot of information on this nutrition fact label. So they are suggesting that if you see something, to make it easier for the regular consumer, if you see 5% of some vitamin or mineral, that's a pretty low amount. If you see 20%, that's a pretty high amount. So that's a better choice. If you see, oh, this has 20% calcium, that's pretty high, so that's probably a good calcium source. But you see it has less than 5% of iron, it's probably not a great iron source. So this is an easy way to designate in your mind what's the best choice. So that's the 520 rule. Here we're looking at the updates. So now in June of 2018, they're changing the label. You might have seen these already. It used to be this, where you can see if you take a look, the differences of the calories here, much larger. Also, you'll notice the vitamins. The vitamins are vitamin A, C. Well, now it's vitamin D. There's only one vitamin, vitamin D. They don't put C or A on the label. It's not required. Calcium is still required, iron is still required, but potassium has replaced vitamin C. So what used to be a vitamin C and A is now vitamin D and potassium. Why? It's because they've discovered that so many, you might have seen the news, of us are deficient in vitamin D. So they want to highlight the fact that vitamin D needs to be, we need to notice how much vitamin D is in our food. Same thing with potassium. We discovered that we're very low in potassium. The RDA is something like 4,000 milligrams, and this one has 235. Well, that looks like a lot, but compared to the fact that we need 4,000, it's only 5% of the daily need, so it's not a great source. The other thing that's new, they put in added sugar. So there's natural sugars. For instance, milk. Milk is sort of sweet. You don't have to add any chocolate or sugar. It's already sweet because it has carbohydrate in it in the form of lactose. So that's a natural sugar. They wouldn't count that in the added sugar. But if I make it chocolate milk and I add sugar to the milk, now I would have to add how much sugar is added. So that's a sort of, could be confusing, but it's separated out because of that. Fiber has been there, always been there. Serving sizes might have changed a little bit. This is still 2/3, but they've changed the location of the serving size, and they want to point out that there's 8 servings per container. Why is that important? Because some people would think they could eat the whole container. They might not notice that there's 8 servings. They think, oh, it's only 55 or 230 calories for this whole item. Well, no, it's only 1/8 of this item. So they make that very clear that this container has 8 servings. So those are some of the differences that you'll see in the new nutrition fact label. Next thing is that the FDA keeps track of what you can claim on your label. So you'll see here, a lot of times you'll notice more whole grains or low in sodium. These are nutrient claims or health claims. A nutrient claim will say, high in fiber or low in sodium. A health claim will say something like, lower cholesterol or it helped heart healthy. So those are 2 claims that the FDA regulates. The third type of claim is kind of complicated. It's a structure function claim. This is where you would say this product will lower your lower your risk of cancer. That's pretty bold to be able to say that I can actually lower your risk of cancer by eating this product. Well, those claims have to be proven by independent research. So the company has to do research and actually show that their product will lower the risk of cancer or lower blood pressure. So when you start getting the structure function claims, they are very particular on whether or not you can list those. So you won't see those probably as often. So common nutrient claims would be sugar-free, fat-free, low-fat. So here's a reduced fat GIF. So reduced fat just means it contains at least 25% less fat. This is actually required by FDA. It has to contain 25% less fat than plain regular peanut butter. So there's very specified amounts in order to make these claims. The next thing is the health claims, as I mentioned. So here's an example of oatmeal, where they said 3 grams of soluble fiber from oatmeal daily in a diet low in saturated fat and cholesterol may reduce the risk of heart disease. So they've gone out on a limb and said this may reduce the risk of actual disease, but they qualify it by saying you have to also have a low saturated fat and cholesterol diet. So they're not saying, oh, just this oatmeal itself will lower your cholesterol, but your chance of heart disease. But if you eat a low fat diet and the cereal, then you might. So that's a health claim. And these have to be reviewed, and they can be fined heavily if they don't follow these rules. And here's, more structure function. So here's an example like antioxidants may help maintain cell integrity, because they don't say what kind of disease it's going to help or hurt or prevent. But they can't say antioxidants prevent the onset of cancer because it's not been proved. They could say calcium builds strong bones, but they can't say calcium reduces the risk of osteoporosis unless they can prove it from research. There's nothing proven at this point. So here's a lot of discussion about the structure function. And then here's one more thing about determining how many calories are in a product. So how do they come up with the calories? This is just the idea that there's 3 macronutrients that provide calories. carbohydrate, fat, and protein. This just shows the breakdown in our diet that's recommended. So about half of our calories should be carbohydrate, about a third fats, and a little less than about a quarter proteins. That's kind of what we generally eat, and that's what's considered a good distribution. And you'll be figuring that out when you do your reports. And calories themselves, if you want to figure out how many calories are in something, you can always do it because it's a simple calculation. If you know how many grams of fat, for instance, are in a product, you just multiply every gram by 9 calories. 1 gram of fat is always 9 calories. 1 gram of carbohydrate is always 4 calories, as is protein. And 1 gram of alcohol is always 7 calories. So if you can keep these little 4, 9, 4, however you want to remember those, you can always determine the calories in a product if you know the breakdown. So here's an example. This grilled chicken sandwich has 46 grams of carb, 14 grams of fat, 45 grams of protein, and no alcohol. Simply take the grams times the calories per gram. And now you got 4 calories per gram. You get 184 calories. There's 9 calories per gram times 14, and so forth. And it comes to the total calories of 490. And you'll have a worksheet to practice this. And here's an example of Joe, who is trying to follow his RDA of 8 milligrams. So he wants to know, well, how much am I getting? How much iron am I getting in this product? Well, it says it has 15% of the daily value of the RDA. How much is 15%? It's 15% of the RDA of 8 milligrams. So he's getting 1.2 milligrams of iron in his particular menu. And here's another calculation then, if you want to just look at how the label is done. So all these numbers are calculated because they can say 1 gram of fat times 9. That means there's 9 calories of fat. You can add that to the next item, which has calories. There's no calories in cholesterol, 0, no calories in sodium. But now carbohydrate has calories, so you can take 15 grams times 4, and that will give you the calories from carbs. And then the protein is 30 grams times 4. So you add up the carbs, the protein, and the fat to get 80 calories. You don't, when you see the fiber underneath the carbohydrate, that is included. The total carb includes the fiber. It includes the sugar. So you don't need to make this a separate calculation. It's all included in the 15. Same with the fat. The total fat incorporates the saturated and the trans fat. So you don't need to figure those out separately. I think that's the last slide. Those are some of the things you'll need to use this in this lesson, and that should be pretty practical. So hopefully you'll have a good week. Okay, thanks.